Today, we're taking a look at Nepal, but probably not the Nepal you're thinking of, the one from the postcards. We're going to look past Everest to understand a nation that's standing at a major economic turning point, facing choices that are going to define its entire future. You see, our sources describe Nepal as this complex economic organism at a critical crossroads. And that's exactly right. The country's been incredibly resilient, no doubt, but its future really hinges on whether it can overcome some deep structural problems that are going to shape its path for the next decade and beyond. Now, if you just glance at the numbers, things look pretty stable. Big institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, they're projecting steady GDP growth. But here's the catch. Those official forecasts are on a collision course with some massive systemic risks. We're talking chronic political instability and extreme vulnerability to climate change, things that threaten to pull the rug out from under any progress.
So, to really get a grip on where Nepal's headed, we first need to understand what its economy is built on. It really rests on 4 key pillars. But as you're about to see, every single one of these pillars has a hidden weakness, a kind of Achilles heel that makes the future a whole lot more complicated.
Okay, pillar number 1, remittances. This is the money sent home from Nepalese people working all over the world, and it is the absolute lifeblood of the country's modern economy. It's acted as this powerful shock absorber, and frankly, it's the main reason we've seen such an impressive drop in poverty over the last couple of decades. And the scale of this is just immense. Remittances make up nearly a quarter of the entire GDP. That's one of the highest rates on the planet. But, and this is a big but, here's the paradox. This lifeline creates what economists call a Dutch disease. Basically, this flood of foreign cash actually makes the local economy less competitive. It kind of discourages investment at home, and crucially, it lets politicians off the hook for making tough, necessary reforms. Pillar number 2 is hydropower. People call it the white gold of the Himalayas, and for good reason. This is probably Nepal's single biggest shot at a real economic breakthrough. It has the potential to completely change the nation's fortunes. The potential here is just staggering. Right now, Nepal is using just a tiny fraction of its available hydropower, and that government target for 2035, it's incredibly ambitious. But remember that Achilles heel? Here, it's a new kind of dependency. Our analysis calls it the energy needle. The entire plan pretty much relies on exporting all that power to just one market, India, and that gives Delhi a huge amount of geopolitical leverage. All right, third, we've got tourism. After getting hammered by the pandemic, the sector is bouncing back strong. But what's really interesting here isn't just that tourists are coming back. It's the strategic pivot the country's making. The government's new digital nomad visa is a really smart play to attract stable, long-term revenue and move beyond the shaky seasonal tourism model. And finally, pillar number 4, agriculture. Now, this is a huge deal because it employs over 60% of the population, but it's still highly unproductive. And its biggest vulnerability by far is climate change. When climate field disasters wipe out crops, it pushes more people to leave the country to find work. And where does that lead? Right back to the remittance dependency we just talked about. It's a classic vicious cycle. So we've got the pillars, but standard economic models, they don't always tell the whole story. They often miss the unpredictable stuff, the forces that can completely change the rules of the game. So now we're going to look at 3 of these wild cards for Nepal. So what are these disruptive forces? What are the factors that could just override all those standard forecasts and send Nepal down a completely different path? Let's think of them as 3 jokers in the deck. The first is internal political turbulence. The second is the geopolitical great game being played out between its massive neighbors, India and China. And the third is the truly existential threat of the climate challenge. How these 3 interact? Well, that's what's ultimately going to decide Nepal's future. And this political instability, it's not just noise in the news. It has a real, measurable cost. Look at this number. This is the percentage of promised foreign direct investment that actually makes it into the country. That's right. A staggering 2/3 of potential investment just evaporates, all because there's no political predictability. Okay, so what happens when you take those 4 pillars, with all their weaknesses, and you throw in these powerful wildcards? You move beyond simple forecasts. Our foresight analysis has modeled 3 distinct, plausible scenarios for Nepal's economy by the year 2035. Now, to be clear, these aren't predictions. Think of them more as structured possibilities. They show us an inertial path, sort of business as usual, an optimistic but risky path, and a truly transformational one. Let's break them down. This table lays it all out. First, you've got scenario 1, the Himalayan tiger on paper. This is basically the path of least resistance. Growth chugs along at 4–5%, still driven by remittances, but the country is stuck in political paralysis. Second, the energy breakthrough. Here, Nepal goes all in on hydropower, hits an amazing 7–8% growth, but becomes dangerously dependent on India. And finally, scenario 3, the digital leap from the shadows. This is the transformational path. Growth is a healthy 6–7%, but it's smart growth, coming from a diverse mix of IT services, green energy, and hydropower. Much, much more resilient. Okay, so what does all this mean for you? If you're an investor or running a business, how do you actually use this? Well, understanding these scenarios points to some hidden opportunities, and just as important, the key signals you need to be watching. So, beyond the obvious plays, our analysis points to 3 really interesting under-the-radar opportunities. First, green monetization. We're talking about selling carbon credits from Nepal's huge forests and clean energy projects. Second, building a real IT hub, investing in that whole digital ecosystem. And third, climate-resilient agrotech. This is a sector with guaranteed demand in a country that's on the front lines of climate change. Think of this as your dashboard for tracking the future in real time. Want to know if the energy breakthrough is happening? Watch for legally binding investment agreements in hydropower and check the actual pace of construction on power lines. To see if the digital leap is taking off, you monitor the number of digital nomad visas, the growth of IT exports, and whether liberal tech laws are getting passed. These are the real-world signs of which path Nepal is on. And that brings us to the big question, the one that really sums this all up. Can a small, climate-vulnerable nation, sandwiched between giants, actually harness these global megatrends to rewrite its own economic destiny? The future isn't set in stone. The next decade is going to be a real-world test, and the answer will have lessons for countries far beyond the Himalayas.